Greetings and salutations. Thank you for lending an ear to The Voice of the Times this Sunday, April 11, 2021. For today's editorial, effective response to COVID can reap political dividends. Vietnam has been on many people's radar, most recently because of its effective response to the pandemic. That success was largely credited to Nguyen Xuan Phuc, who was rewarded by his country's National Assembly that recently elected him president. We cite this news to argue that effective leadership, particularly good performance during this health crisis, yields political dividends. Failure or poor performance will cost political capital, as can be observed in the United States and Brazil. The US example might be more familiar. Former President Donald Trump lost his re-election bid last November, arguably because of the pandemic and the economic fallout from it. To date, the US leads the world in total number of cases, with around 31 million, and total deaths, with more than 560,000. Of course, there were other election issues that worked against Mr. Trump, perhaps most notably racial discrimination and inequality, but those paled in comparison with the economic blow dealt by COVID-19. Even then, it took a record high number of votes to keep Mr. Trump from serving a second term. Another political leader likened to Mr. Trump is Jair Bolsonaro. He is president of Brazil, which has the second highest number of COVID-19 cases of about 13.2 million and total deaths of about 345,000. The pandemic has Brazil reeling, with daily deaths now averaging 4,000. President Bolsonaro, who continues to downplay the threat of this crisis, is also suffering the consequences. His popularity ratings fell to 32.9% in February from 41.2% in October, based on media reports. In another poll published in March, 54% of Brazilians said Mr. Bolsonaro's record on the pandemic was bad or awful. Like the Philippines, presidential elections in Brazil will be in 2022, and while it is too early to write off Mr. Bolsonaro, few might argue that the health crisis is exacting a hefty toll on his re-election bid. Regarding reward and risks, by law, Philippine presidents serve only one term. That was the design of the 1987 Constitution, supposedly to allow the president to make hard decisions that would be beneficial for the country. Nonetheless, the removal of a second term does not necessarily mean that an incumbent president has no political interests after his or her term. Former Presidents Joseph Estrada and Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo know all too well the perils of an unfriendly successor in Malacanang. Even without that threat, former presidents play kingmaker after their time in office, but they risk living up to the moniker lame duck or becoming an outcast if they have little political capital left. Vietnam's experience shows us the other side of the coin, so to speak. We saw how effective leadership and strategies against the pandemic can result in political rewards. Mr. Nguyen's election was a first, given that no other Vietnamese prime minister has ever become president. Granted, Vietnam is not the Philippines, and what Mr. Nguyen did for his country, as effective as it is unlikely to be acceptable here. Strict granular-style lockdowns suited Vietnam, for instance, because the government there keeps tabs on every Vietnamese, who are required to carry identity cards. In contrast, many Filipinos are fearful of their government, and most are protective of their privacy. Then again, every country is different. The Philippines needs to figure out how to effectively do the necessary things, such as proper contact tracing and faster vaccinations. Our leaders should think outside the proverbial box. At a cost of 8 billion pesos a day, the bubble at present over Metro Manila and some adjacent provinces may prove to be too pricey. The political costs may turn out to be too much. To be fair, doing the right thing is never easy. Even before the pandemic, the Philippines needed more hospitals and other medical facilities, as well as doctors and other health professionals. COVID-19 merely exposed the shortcomings of our healthcare system. Still, successfully addressing the current crisis has its rewards, as Vietnam demonstrates, and failure carries heavy political costs, as our examples above suggest. Politicians and others aspiring for elective office should take note, especially now that the political season here has started. And that's the editorial for Sunday, April 11, 2021. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to our digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and listen to The Voice of the Times.